Thank you, Anita, for leading us so helpfully. It's very challenging for worship leaders to lead worship with nobody else able to join in with them. So we're really grateful to all of those who do that week by week for us. Hopefully it won't be long till we can vocally join in and worship. We can join in certainly in other ways, standing, worshipping in our minds, in our thoughts, but one day we'll sing together again. That will be great, won't it? And as for changing the words of a psalm, all you need to do is call it a reflection based on psalm, whatever it is, and then you can get away with it. That's fine. So this sermon is a reflection based on some parts of the Bible, just so that I've got to get out, just in case. I'll start with a quiz question for you to ponder. First of all, what do Man Friday from the Robinson Crusoe books, Chewbacca from the Star Wars series, and Puss in Boots from the Shrek movies, what do they have in common? So there you go. You can have some guesses on the chat if you like from home. That's a question to be pondering, even as you continue to listen, of course. And as we think about God as our Father today, which is kind of a theme that's running through, we're also going to ponder our key verse, which is here, just behind me, in white on blue. So hopefully you can see that. My head's in the way of most of it. But you all know it by heart, of course, by now. He says he's about to read it from his notes. Let him lead me to the banquet hall, and let his banner over me be love. And so we've just doing 2 weeks. Last week, Dave looked at the lead me part. And today we're thinking about the over me part, which is appropriate as we think of God as our Father. And fathers, of course, have authority over their children. And so there's that sense of we grow up under the authority of parents. And fathers obviously are part of that, under the authority of our Father. And we're looking at these two phrases in the ongoing context of what we've been thinking about as a church over the past weeks and months. We had a series where we looked at our God-given shape. What are our spiritual gifts? What are we passionate about? What is our heart? What are our abilities? And what is our personality? What part does that have to play? And finally, our experiences. So we've looked at and thought about that. And if you haven't caught up with any of those, they're all available on the YouTube channel, and the materials that we sent out, if you just contact the office, we can get those to you, because there were some forms to fill in to try and discern who God has made us to be. And then we looked at Psalm 146, and we looked at all these things that God is doing in his world. He upholds the cause of the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. The Lord sets prisoners free. The Lord gives sight to the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. The Lord watches over the foreigner and sustains the fatherless and the widow, but he frustrates the ways of the wicked. Again, each of those lines we've spoken about in that series, and you might want to go back and revisit some of those, or have a listen if you missed any, to work out and think about what is it that God is up to, and how do I in my shape fit in with that. And behind all of that is this key verse, that in all of that we are led by God. He leads us. And in all of that, as we were going to be thinking this morning, he is over us. He has authority there. And in the verse it says, let his banner over me be love. Well, banners back in those days, particularly in Old Testament times, were used in battle. So you would hold a banner, someone would hold a banner, it would probably just be a stick with something on the end, a flag or something like that, rather than a long banner that we think of today. But you would hold this banner up, and that would, anyone who positioned themselves under that banner is saying, this is the army that I'm part of. This is who I belong to. And this is who I'm committed to. So on a battlefield, you'd have banner of one army and all the people behind that, and the banner of another held up. And so when you're under the banner, you're under the authority of that. and you're committing to it. And also the banner would be vital during a battle, so you knew where your army were. So if there's skirmishes and different things going on, you could always look back and see the banner and know the place to go to if you needed to. If you were hurt or you needed supplies or whatever it was, you could see where your army was based and go back under the banner. Kind of a rallying point, if you like. And there's a story in the Old Testament in Exodus 17. The story many of us know about Moses holding up his hands. There was a battle going on, and as his hands fell because he got tired, they started to lose the battle. And as he raised his hands again, they started to win. So his friends Aaron and Hur come and hold his hands up. And in his hand is the staff of God. So he's holding this over the battle. And they eventually win the battle. And at the end of that, in verse 15, it says this: Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." That's one of the names of God, the biblical names of God. It's called Jehovah Nissi. The Lord is my banner. The Lord is the one, Moses says, the one that I'm committed to, the one that I'm choosing to come under the authority of. The place where I can go in the midst of life, the place where I can go and know that's where I belong, under that banner that is God. And so this morning we're going to be thinking about what it means to let God's banner be over our lives. And we need to be clear, I guess, immediately that as we talk about over me and God being over us, God is ultimately already over everything and everyone. If you have a Bible with you or an app on your phone, just turn with me to Isaiah chapter 45. In chapter 45, God is speaking to his people. And I'm going to start reading from verse 18. For this is what the Lord says: He who created the heavens, he is God. He who fashioned and made the earth, he founded it. He did not create it to be empty, but formed it to be inhabited. He says, I am the Lord, and there is no other. I have not spoken in secret from somewhere in a land of darkness. I have not said to Jacob's descendants, seek me in vain. I, the Lord, speak the truth. I declare what is right. Gather together and come. Assemble, you fugitives from the nations. Ignorant are those who carry about idols of wood, who pray to gods that cannot save. Declare what is to be. Present it. Let them take counsel together. Who foretold this long ago? Who declared it from the distant past? Was it not I, the Lord? And there is no God apart from me. God says, there is no other. I am God, and there is no other. And he goes on to say, turn to me and be saved, all you ends of the earth, for I am God and there is no other. There's that picture, isn't there, of God as the banner. And he's saying, come to the banner and be saved. Come to where you belong, to the one who is over you, who's in authority. Come and be saved under the banner of God. The Almighty, all-powerful, sovereign, with all authority over all of creation and all of history. The Almighty, all-powerful, sovereign, with all authority over all creation and all of history. And he continues in verse 23 of Isaiah 45. By myself I have sworn, he says, my mouth has uttered in all integrity a word that will not be revoked. Before me every knee will bow. By me every tongue will swear. All of humanity, all of creation, all of history is under his authority, and he is over everyone. All are accountable to him, whether they like it or not. And God makes it clear here that the day is coming when all will recognize him as sovereign over them. And all, he says, will bow the knee before him. Bowing the knee is a sign of submission before somebody. He says that day is coming. And Anita sang about it earlier. If you were listening to the words of the opening song or following them through, she sang this. One day, every tongue will confess you are God. One day, every knee will bow. And then she sang this. Still, the greatest treasure remains for those who gladly choose you now. So there is a day coming when all will bow the knee before God, when all will recognize and realize that they are under him. But today, we can choose to come under his authority ourselves by choice, to bow the knee before him, not to wait until that day, but to choose to do that now, today. Ian shared a bit about the wedding last Saturday. I'm sure you won't mind me sharing, but at a point of the wedding, the minister got both the bride and the groom separately to bow the knee before one another as a sign of that commitment to one another, if you like, that sign of submitting. At the beginning of the passage in Ephesians 5, the passage that men love to quote because it says, women submit to your husbands, and we love to quote that. But at the first verse says, submit to one another. So it's a great image, that image of both choosing one by one to bow the knee and submit to the other. The decision to put another before yourself, to choose the will of another instead of your own will. And in James 4 verse 7 it says, submit yourselves then to God. Choosing to bow the knee. And bowing the knee is an act of great humility. There's a time in the past where we were working with a group of men whose wives were Christians and they weren't. And what became clear in our conversations and engagements with them, they knew the gospel, they understood it, they in some ways didn't question it, but the thing they wouldn't do was bow the knee. They wouldn't hand over authority to God. They wanted to keep the authority themselves of their own lives. And the problem with that is described in the Bible in Psalm 81 verses 10 to 12. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt. Open wide your mouth and I will fill it, he promises. But my people would not listen to me. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own desires. It's interesting, isn't it? Because in this Western culture, the thing people want more than anything else is to be able to do what they want when they want. That's the goal. If I can have all the resources and the time and the energy to do whatever I want, whenever I want, that's the perfect life. And the Bible says, actually, in that case, that's not a good place to be. There is a way that appears to be right, Proverbs 16 says, but in the end it leads to death. That actually separated from God is a dangerous place to be. And so the question is, are we ready and willing to put our lives in his hands? To bow the knee and give him authority over our day-to-day lives. And that is a high-risk strategy. To bow the knee to somebody and give them authority over your life is a risky thing to do, isn't it? We can imagine the dangers of that. It's an act of great courage to do that. But it's also an act of great faith. We need to have real confidence and faith and trust in the one that we are giving our lives over to. We wouldn't ever do that if we were uncertain as to what they might do, as to whether their intentions for us were good and right. And so initially that decision to put our life into God's hands is a decision of the heart and mind. Choosing to place him over us in our lives. And perhaps there's many here in the building and many others listening who have done that. They've come to a point where they've Being able to say to God, I want to give my life to you, and I want you to lead me, and I want you to be in authority over me. I'm reminded of a line that was shared a couple of weeks ago in another talk. The more I give God control, the more like the real me I become, because he created me. And that's where the risk is worth taking. The one that we are giving our lives to is the one who gave us life in the first place. Are you ready and willing to make this decision today, either for the first time or to remake it? Malcolm Duncan, in his book Risk Takers, I've spoken of the book before, really great book. He writes this: we have a deeply flawed view of God's purposes in the world. The deepest flaw is that we put ourselves at the center of the great story. It all becomes about us. It's as if we see everything through the lens of me. God graciously starts where he finds us as he begins to reveal his great story to us. That's because God always comes to where we are, to meet with us. He never waits for us to find him somewhere else. So he comes to us and then beckons us to follow him, much like Jesus did with his disciples. He does not come to us and then hunker down beside us so that we carry on as before, only this time with Jesus as our friend. If he were to do that, there would be no fundamental shift in our perspective. We would still be at the center of our lives, and Jesus would be at the edge. But that isn't how God's story works. If it were, then we would be God, because we would be the ones calling the shots, and God would be merely looking in at our lives, asking if there was anything that we would like him to do for us. Stepping into the great story of God changes everything. In stepping into the story, I acknowledge that God is at the center of all things, not me. I cannot truly step into the great story of God while at the same time remaining at the center of my own story. That demands surrender. It demands submission, and it involves risk. The risk is handing over control of your life to God. It is taking your hands off the steering wheel. Where is the risk, you ask? Well, can't you see? The risk is letting go of everything that defines you now, so that the God who knows you intimately can take hold of you. He offers us our part in his great story. He has a part for you to play, but are you brave enough to accept it? It's a challenging read, but a helpful one. To recognize that to put God over us is a huge decision, but one that invites us into a bigger story than just our own. The story of the whole of human history, of all of creation, of all that God has done and is doing and will do. And we enter that as we bow the knee before him and allow him to lead us and be over us. And maybe there are people today who want to make that decision, to pray, to say to God, yeah, I want to choose for you to be over my life. Well, you can do that. It's a simple prayer, just to ask him, just to say, I trust you and I put my faith in you. And I ask you to lead. And then to listen to his voice day by day, to hear what he wants to say to us. Because you see, the decision that we make is not a one-off decision that we made one day back when we prayed a particular prayer. It's a day-by-day decision. And it's great each morning to reaffirm that decision we've made, to say, perhaps even before we get out of bed, today I submit my life to you, Lord. But even more than that, choosing to submit to God is an ongoing decision that we make many times each day, moment by moment. The desire to align our will with his, not the other way around. And man, do we wish it was the other way around. If only God did all the things that I thought he should do. If only he did all the things that I want to see done. If only he answered my prayers in the way I want them to be. Then it would be okay. We've got the story the wrong way around. We want to align our will with his, to learn what he wants and to seek that. In each decision we make day by day, to choose what he wants us to do rather than what we want to do. And that's how Jesus himself lived. Jesus had already made the decision to follow the Father and to obey him. In John 8, he says this, "When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father has taught me. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him." Here's Jesus clearly stating that he is submitting, he's bowing the knee to the Father and saying, I am only going to do what pleases him. But there also needs to be a decision day by day, and we see that in the Garden of Gethsemane. This is the point, the night before Jesus is about to be crucified. He's about to be arrested and taken away and go through this horrific crucifixion and of all that builds up to it. And it is not his will to go through this. It's not what he would choose for himself. And so he kneels in the garden and he desperately prays to God for an alternative. Is there another way that we can do this? He has a moment-by-moment decision to make. He's already committed to do that. But in that moment, we see how difficult this situation is for him. And then he says these words at the end of his prayer, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." What that reveals to us, and we don't like to perhaps even think about this, is that in that moment, Jesus' will is not the same as his Father's. He says, "Yet not my will." Not what I want, which is not to go through all of this stuff, but yours be done. In that moment, he makes that choice again. In the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing what's coming, he makes the decision. I'm going to choose your will and not mine. Philippians 2 verses 9 to 11. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Jesus is part of that picture of everyone bowing the knee because of his obedience and his commitment and his death on the cross. So we all will bow the knee before him on that day and come under his authority. Man Friday, Chewbacca, Puss in Boots, Quiz Answer, Patricia Waller. They all had a great deal of hair. No, not quite. Anybody got a clue as to what they have in common? Each of them had their lives saved by somebody else. And as a result of having their lives saved by that person, they chose to commit their lives to that person. Man Friday and Robinson Crusoe saved him, and so he chose to be his servant, to serve him, because he was in life debt to him. Same is true of Chewbacca. Chewbacca was rescued by Han Solo, and his life was saved. That's why Chewbacca is committed to and goes wherever Hans does and does whatever Hans does and will give his life for him. Puss in Boots in the Shrek movies, his life is saved and he commits himself to Shrek and says, I will follow you and I will do what you require of me. And in none of those examples is the debt forced by the lifesaver. This isn't the lifesaver saying, right, now I've saved your life, you are in debt to me. This is the one who's been saved saying, what you've done for me means that I want to give my life for you. Each one gladly submits, no longer living for themselves, but for the one who has saved them. And it's a great picture for us. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 15. Jesus died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again. Isn't that such a clear picture of what we've been talking about? And Paul suggests here the reason Jesus died is so that we would no longer live for ourselves. That by being saved, we no longer put ourselves at the center of our story. We choose instead to live for him who died for us, the loving Father who gave his life. That's the natural response. You gave your life to me, so I give mine to you. And that's not in order to pay back the debt. That debt was paid at the cross. It's just in thanksgiving and response to him paying the debt for us. Lead me and over me. Proverbs 3, 5, 6, as we finish, says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Such a helpful picture of being led by God, God making our path straight, of showing us the way to go, of enabling us to follow him and go the way that he has for us. But also in all our ways to submit to him, in all those moments, in all those situations, to say, I'm going to come under your will. I'm going to do what you would choose. And sometimes we might think that we're giving things up when we do that. And sometimes it will feel like that. When I was first called to Moorlands, and we really believed that God was calling us down to there, two of the things that I was really thinking that I would miss was playing the drums, because I was playing for a number of bands in Macclesfield at the time and loved playing the drums, and playing football. Played football for a local team and really enjoyed that. And as we think about our shape, those were things that I could do fairly well. I won't say, I mean, obviously I could have been a professional footballer, just never had the breaks. And I had to let them go and say, I don't know when we get down there whether I'm going to be able to do either of those things in any way. And kind of just said, okay, I'll leave those behind. Once I got down there, within the first year of college, I became part of the college band. And suddenly I was now drumming in worship and drumming with a band for God's glory instead of for mine. And not knowing, discovered Moorlands had their own football team, and became captain of the team in the first year, and really again was able to play football in a way. And we decided as a team, we want every time we walk on the pitch that we glorify God. We're not going to appeal for throw-ins when we know it's not ours. We're not going to argue and fight and cause trouble. We are going to play football in a godly way to his glory. And as I let go of those things, so God gave me them back, but to his glory instead of mine. So there may be things that we feel we've lost, but God has shaped you and given you, created you the way you are, because he wants to use those things he's put in you to his glory. And also in Psalm 146, it's his work that he's doing, and therefore we come under his authority as he does that. So that picture of God being over us. And we're going to finish with a song. And it starts with these words: over all the earth you reign on high. Every mountain stream, every sunset sky. The same place we started this morning, to declare that he is already over all of the earth that he created. And then it says this: but my one request, Lord, my only aim is that you'd reign in me again. Yes, you reign over all already. And the day's coming when all will acknowledge that and all will bow the knee. But today I can say, Lord, reign in me again. So as you listen to this song, or as you sing it in your homes, then please do use it as a response to say to God, yes, I'm going to choose today again to allow you to reign in my life, to be on the throne. Thanks, Anita.